I do want to point out Jeff Hoover is here to assist. He's another craftsman and coach with us at Pillar. He's here for questions too. He can definitely, hopefully, call out the BS that I ramble through sometimes, and we'll make it work. But he's here to help, but mostly it'll be me guiding you guys through all this. So real quick, a little bit about me. Technically, I kind of consider myself the first couple things there, business improvement consultant. Tend to go into companies and focus on trying to find ways to bring business value. But also this agile practitioner developer plays in a lot. Certainly a big part of my history, and also still get to get into that when I can, but most of my time right now is more the above, as more of a coach working with organizations to improve what they do. But also the other things, innovator, hacker, maker, all those things, like to play when I can. If you guys ever get the chance, go out and go down and check out Code Mash. It's a week-long conference down in Sandusky at the Kalahari Indoor Water Park there. Really, really good collaborative learning environment. You're all kind of every 2,000 local and traveling engineers and whatnot trapped inside a water park. Makes for some good conversations and learning. But I got to spend a day down there just doing a hack day and really just working on, they kind of gave us two different challenges. They did, of course, the bot challenge, fighting bots, but then they also did a line tracer. And I built my own line tracer bot that got to follow the black line around the little course. I didn't win, but I didn't lose, so that's good. And it did make its way through, so I was pretty proud of it. Also a dad. I got twin boys and a little girl, so I'm their Cub Scout leader, which is fun. These last two are what I basically do to keep sane around all the work stuff. So, and I'm a professional snowboard instructor. Currently, I teach at Mount Brighton, so if anybody also wants to get away and have some fun outdoor, cold, winter, snowy fun time, come hang out with me. Where I've been. So over the past 9 years that I've been with these guys, I've been at these organizations, some medium, some big. I've also dabbled in a few smaller ones that we've worked through. We do some startup work at Pillar, and I've helped out a little bit with those, but most of my time's been spent in these guys. So for the session, as I was kind of hinting towards, we want to focus on principles over prescription, discussion over presentation, and then learning over just listening. So as I kind of mentioned, please just holler out if you got questions, concerns, and want to discuss anything. So I'm going to seed a question as we start out here. Would you guys prefer to build the thing right, aka build it correctly, or build the right thing, have the right thing at the end? And just kind of think of that question as we talk through these things. Obviously kind of plays into where we're going to go with TDD and ATDD. So before we get into that, the which, where, and when, let's discuss the what and why. So TDD, test-driven development, or sometimes called test-driven design, right? The practice of basically building up unit-level tests as we go and driving out the code from that. I think I heard some reference, it was either Jesse, I think maybe that mentioned you guys get actually pushed a lot through some of the software stuff you guys get into with driving with tests first. That's a really good thing. A big piece that plays onto that, though, which I'm not sure they push around a lot here, is refactoring, right? After you have that test that proves it's doing what it's doing, do you go back and look at the code to clean it up? Try to get it to do it better. That's a big piece of TDD and something that benefits as you do it. So it ensures that we thoroughly unit test modularized, flexible, extensible code. Focuses on writing only the code necessary to pass those tests, and then keeps the design simple and clear. Does that agree with what you guys thought about TDD? Yeah? Okay. I'm not good at noticing hands up either, so if I do miss a hand, please just holler out, hey Dan, let me ask you a question. I'll try to shut up. So ATDD, on the other hand, is acceptance test-driven development. It's kind of an extension of TDD. So its purpose is to help aid the folks in devising the system, i.e. developers, into writing what's appropriate in the code. So that is the code that reflects the outcomes desired. It makes us know that we're building the things as they should be built. These tests tend to be written and supported directly by testers and stakeholders as opposed to the people actually writing the code, right? So that's a little bit different.
To maybe state the obvious, the word acceptance there is the business is accepting that it's the product they want.
Right. So stakeholders have a good say in that. Testers, knowing what the stakeholders need, obviously have that same premise. So, excuse me, behavior-driven development, you'll sometimes catch, or BDD, is really actually pretty similar to ADD. The goals are the same, but it's really driven by actual developers now, as opposed to the stakeholders or the testers. So a lot of times BDD is brought ahead of TDD to help us establish what we need in order to build the right thing. Ultimately, as we talk through it, I think I mentioned there, we'll kind of call them both the same as we talk through today. So, little experiment. Can you help me pass some of those out to each row? So you guys are going to get some 3x5 cards. Using that 3x5 card, you can write on it to try to establish what you might use as some ways to TDD it. But I want us to think through, if we were to take a requirement around this 3x5 card and use it to establish some TDD dynamics, what might they be? And here's the requirement I want us to focus on. So our requirement, draw one red line and 10 blue parallel lines on one side of the card. So that's our requirement. That's what we need to do to meet what the business needs. Think about that for a minute. Maybe discuss with guys around you. What might be ways that we could TDD that? What might be the test-driven things we could do to try to understand how to reach that goal? And I'll seed a few with you guys. So maybe we need to assert the card orientation, right? Are we doing it horizontal or landscape? Right, sorry, horizontal or portrait? Landscape or portrait? What's the first line's direction? So even though we might be holding the card one way, do we know that we're drawing the line the right way? How long should those lines be? How do we know if that's something we should understand? Maybe it doesn't matter. So what about the second line? Should it be the same length as the first line? Are they the same distance? Any other thoughts? What are some other ways we might be able to TDD this requirement? Okay, this is one of those points I'll shut up and you guys can actually talk. Thoughts? Collaborate? Holler it out? Line thickness? That's a really good one. Are they big, bold lines or are they really skinny lines? Yeah, that's true. I just say one red line. I don't say if it's the first or the last or the middle. Yep, so that's kind of distance away I think I put there, but yeah, the width between them. Yes, so what is parallel in the context of those parallel lines? So I've heard that one a couple times. Which line is the red line? Is it the first one or the last one or one of the middle ones? Good question. I don't know. I wasn't very specific in my.
No, he's giving us the answer.
So take these. I'm, of course, giving them to you blank side up. Go ahead and keep the ones around you guys right now. Use them for notes. Use them what you might need to. Here's a couple more just in case you guys need. You missed a card. Well, now you get one because this one's easy. I guess.
Thanks.
So, now we have a new card. So what if I was to cede that card to you when I handed you my requirement? So how do we think this card maybe betrays the ATD aspect? Right? So if you're looking at the ruled side of it, it's a lot easier to understand that requirement, isn't it? You now know what the goal is. You have an idea in your head. So I saw you down here drawing some lines. They were diagonal. That's great. That might be an awesome way to draw lines on an index card. But not necessarily what I needed, right? Not what 3M sells in their huge packets of 3x5 cards. So there's some premise to acceptance test help us understand the goal, what it is we're after. Now, just handing you that card doesn't prove that whatever code you wrote makes that right, does it? So this is still just a guide, but this kind of seats in that idea or that theory behind the acceptance tests driven context. Any questions? Thoughts? Concerns? Yeah? Fair enough. So, a common practice that they tend to use is this red-green refractor cycle. This is a really good one, and Jeff actually helped me draw out this a while back. And I had him look through my deck earlier, and he's like, hey, that was my diagram. I'm like, yeah, it is. I stole it, and I'm going to keep stealing it. But it shows the great cycle of those, right? So you can start with the acceptance test. We have a big idea, part of a story card perhaps, part of that requirement. We write it so that it fails, and then we want to get it to green. So in order to have it start out with red and come back to green, we use unit tests, or TDD, small incremental, to get there, to build out the bigger piece, to have it. Those cycles make sense? You guys seen this before, the red-green refractor? It's pretty common around Agile in the software development practice. Write a red test, start with it failing, write just enough code to get it to green so it passes, and then take an attempt to clean up that code, to refactor it. How could you do it better? Less lines, less actual implementation to get it to do the same thing. There's some pretty amazing things out there where through refactor and just doing things chained together in different ways, you can take a 100-line piece of code down to 2 lines. And it's pretty amazing what some refactoring can do. But to have a little security blanket around you while you do that with tests, some of the acceptance tests and some of the TDD is really powerful. Gives you that ability to change without actually worrying too much about it.
Can you flip back?
Please. Not on my phone because I don't know how to go back on it yet.
Seriously. So one way I think about this is the outside loop really involves your customer, the business, whoever's going to sell whatever it is that you're making, and they either write or help you write the story of what the thing's supposed to do and the test of how they will accept it as a product. So you write that test like Dan said. First it fails because I don't have any code that does anything like what they asked. And then I start my inner loop here of writing test-driven development where I'm writing little unit test in a language that my product owner probably doesn't understand because they're not a dev. And that inner loop is just dev stuff. It's just write a little failing test, write some code to make it pass, clean it up round and round and round until you've built up enough that that failing test that you had initially is passing, and now you actually have a feature, and then you just repeat the outer loop again. Does that
resonate? Make sense? Cool. Thank you, Jeff. So why? So they both support us in this building of small, incremental, iterative pieces, often referred to as an agile process. So let's just assume you added some new functionality, you compiled it, you tested it, everything was good. Chances are pretty good. Sometimes that new code might break something else, right? Might hurt a bit different piece that you connected to somewhere else. Might break the chain down the stream. Wouldn't it be much easier to find out and trace to that defect that maybe created it if you only had a few lines that were broken, and those few lines were called out specifically by a test that you had connected to it? So a big piece of TDD often equates into the context of the test harness, right? So you use it to build it, but you're not done with it then. It doesn't go away. It's not garbage. That's what you throw against your test harness. You put in your continuous integration environment. It's always running against your current build, and therefore validating that everything you have going right now is still good, and that every time you change, it's still good. And at any point that it breaks, either by you or by something else, like one of the pieces of code you're calling from somewhere else, an API you're calling or something changed, you now know, and you have a flag, exactly where to look to when it's broken. So pretty powerful there.
Anybody write a couple pages of code on your working project, and then suddenly some other corner of your app doesn't work, and you have no idea why those 2 pages broke it? And you got to go through all those 2 pages? I used to do that all the time. And now, if I write a little test, I write a couple lines of code to make it pass. The worst thing I have to do is undo that 3-4 minutes of code, back, completely throw it out, and I'm back good and everything works.
As opposed to days or weeks or even a broken production build, which in a business context is really painful. Cool, makes sense? Secondary piece. This is pretty much why I tend to use it. Protection. From what? Wow, let's get into it. Anything and everything. As we just kind of hinted to, one thing it protects you from, scope creep, right? So by drawing diagonal lines, how much work did we put into creating those lines diagonally when we actually just needed them straight horizontal? We can avoid that if we know ahead of time what we're really after and can avoid some of that scope creep. The missed requirements, right? What if you didn't know it was the first line that was supposed to be read? It was the last line that's supposed to be read. And you had done the last line read. Now you got to go change it because we didn't have it right to start with. Changing requirements. What if I told you, that's awesome, you put the red line at the top. That's even what I thought I wanted when I gave you my acceptance test. But I don't like it like that. I need it the other way. I actually want to use the card upside down, so I need that red line last. Well, your requirements just changed. That's the business. That's everyday life. Changes are going to happen. TDD is just one piece of that larger agile context of software development that helps us react to change as opposed to avoid it or be scared of it. Gold plating. Anybody know what gold plating is? Any idea? You want to call it out? No? I saw a nod. Gold plating is basically building above and beyond the requirements. So maybe you thought, well, sure, they asked for 10 lines, but I can throw out 15 lines and it doesn't cost anything extra. All I got to do is this one little tweak. Well, that's great, but that's not what I asked for. You're building above and beyond what was needed and therefore taking time to do it. Now, obviously, tweaking one variable, saying 10 to 15 is not a big deal. But if you thought, oh, by affecting this piece of business here, I can get all this extra stuff over here for nothing, and it's great, maybe it could be, but the fact that you didn't actually check with the business that they thought that was valuable too, that's gold plating. It's building above and beyond what's really needed. And then finally, and most importantly, I think, is to protect yourself. I tend to do the gold plating and the scope creep and all those things when I code. I just get in there and I start going for it. And next thing I know, I have a whole crap ton of code that I didn't really need because I could have done it in those 2 lines and just been done. Reached the requirement and been good with it. Secondarily from yourself is, as Jeff mentioned, you make a change because you think it's great and it's going to make everything better, and all that stuff over there broke. Now you don't know why. You have to go hunt it down. You spend a week trying to debug stuff. That's bad. Protect yourself from that change so that you don't have to spend all that cycle time. Make sense? Yeah? Cool. So now we can get into a little bit of the which, where, and when. So obviously, it depends on what your testing purposes are. So do you want to make sure you're building that product system process correctly? Is testing those independent small objects and making sure each piece works as is intended the goal? Because that's a TDD thing. Versus a TDD. It's that broader, larger view of the product and system. It's that mechanism to facilitate the conversation between devs and the stakeholders to make sure that we're really getting what they need. Cool? So it depends on your testing goals. As we hinted to, right, TDD, is often considered the superset or subset of the larger context of TDD. It's not a replacement for it. You're not going to make sure those things that you change later are protected if you only had a TDD, right? Because it's just asserting that bigger, broader context. So if you need to know the small units are doing their thing, TDD is just enough. But if your goals are also to focus on the stakeholders, the steps that take to achieve the goals, then ATDD is good. So yeah, you're not starting with the small pieces, you're getting the bigger, larger, broader stuff. So, so documentation can play into this, and as well as getting that large view of you're proving out that you're getting the end goal. Cool? Thoughts? Questions? All right. So some advantages and disadvantages. And they can go each way, actually. I read through this last time I did this talk. Sometimes what might be an advantage on one side is an actual disadvantage. So like I thought a pro for TDD was that it's complex. It lets you be complex because it can give you all the details. It can give you those specific little pieces. Somebody mentioned, well, isn't complex a bad thing? I'm like, not necessarily if the value's there to understand why it's complex and it proves out its end. So TDD Pro, but ATDD Con, you don't get a lot of detail out of ATDD tests, right? When they fail, you just know something in the broader scope of things failed. You don't necessarily know the little piece, where TDD, being that complex, is going to help you know the little piece. So verbose, TDD, not so verbose. ATDD tends to be in a common language. The given, when, then scenarios will help you understand really what's going on. Can you reuse and inherit? You tend to a lot with TDD. The same piece that you do to set up for one test, you can use for the next test. Not so much on the ATDD side. Plain text, as I just mentioned, easier to read ATDD type tests over TDD type tests. But both can be easily maintainable and help create the focus of pinpointing stuff. So, anybody agree, disagree? Any thoughts to that one, Jeff?
Well, you already mentioned how acceptance tests are usually written in English language. It's something that the business would understand. You hinted at the given, when, then. It might be something like, given I'm sitting at the home page, when I enter incorrect credentials, then I get this error message. That's something that any business person can spell out. Doesn't tell me anything about the code underneath, but
Right.
it's something that's got to work.
Yep. Where TDD could, right, the unit test could tell you all the specifics of, oh, you failed because the password was incorrect, or whatever the issues may be. So a few common tools. Some of these you guys may be used to. If you're getting into Java, you might see JUnit as an NUnit type framework. C languages, XUnit or NUnit. If you're getting into ATDD, tools like Cucumber, JBehave, Fit or Fitness are all related to supporting ATD type tests.
Anybody seen any of those?
Couple, yeah.
They didn't teach me that stuff either.
Yeah, these are things that we tend to help people learn, not so much schooling, so it's okay if you hadn't heard of it. The fact that I planted a seed, maybe you'll go look into it, that's what we're after. Tools used for either or both, RSpec for Ruby, Jasmine for JavaScript. JavaScript's an interesting one. We're only becoming more and more dependent on it as everything goes more and more to the front end and the client side. So JavaScript's pretty big, especially when you get into Node and things like that. Having a testing framework around that can be really beneficial, especially in code like JavaScript, which is actually pretty ugly code to start with. Having tests around it is good to have, right? Only helps protect yourself, and that's what we're after. And then things like Selenium for web, CSS even can have some testing context around it to know, oh, that changed. I broke something. I should probably react to that. Cool? Any other tools or thoughts? Yeah, please.
So I've seen some Cucumber specs before, and I was confused at how something that easy to read actually turns into an automated test.
So in our ever-evolving world of frameworks expanding upon frameworks upon, and then just growing out and out, right? Cucumber is just a framework that sits on top of other languages that take that, parse that into real code, and then drive out the measurables behind it. Some of that's good because it's abstracted, and the business doesn't need to know that. Usually somebody else, middleware or endware, needs to know that detail, right, to know how that stuff works together. Way back when, with one of the older clients, Delta, that I was with, Delta Insurance, they basically built in their own context of Cucumber where we gave a portal for the business to come in and put all of their insurance specs, and we would take that, port it into a Java application that would run tests against it, compare the numbers, and then feed us the information back. Yeah, that's what we expected, or no, it wasn't. So there's some level of abstraction or framework that's built upon it. Certainly things you could dig into and may even need to dig into if you're the one that's actually using that to port to. Usually those tests, again, become beneficial when you tie them to something like your continuous integration environment that's taking and building your code all the time and making sure that stuff's really working. So it's there, right? It's under the covers per se, but
So can I take a crack
please.
at that? So again, in the given when then scenario that you see in a Cucumber spec, the library comes with hooks so that when I put in a given one then message, like given I've already entered 17 into the calculator, when I add 12 I should get whatever the hell that is.
Big numbers, it's hard,
right, yeah.
it's hard to calculate.
So then in the given, what will happen if I compile just that is the framework will give me a place to initialize my object, my, say, calculator class. I'll call the new on my calculator class in the given. And then in the when, I'll put in the first number. I'll say, calculator set initial number equals whatever. And then in the then, I'll put in my test assertion. So it gives you like kind of an empty flow. Does that make some sense?
So then is the goal to be just sort of readable then? Or I guess like you said writable for people who aren't programmers, but like do they have like a drop-down menu or something? Or do they
It certainly can. That's basically what we had built, was a drop-down context. Generally, there is some learning curve to it in that you want them to know, okay, I want calculator to be spelt exactly this way with the capital C, so that when I run it through my parser, it gets caught as that's the class I need to call. And right, there's some learning curve to it. Generally, it's picked up pretty easy to know that they could, run it that way. You also could give them some tool to seed some of that stuff. So, okay, just fill out this form, and by filling out the form with the right information, you can take that, right, extract that to a text and put it through your parser, and then you get the test that you run through in that shell context. So, ways that it can be bridged and worked to your advantage. So,
The framework even can be smart sometimes. Like if it'll notice in my when that I've specified a numeric value, in the skeleton code that it builds, it'll put in a numeric argument. So it kind of intuits the direction, and it might just call it num, and then I might want to refactor it to some name that means something to me. But
yep.
it gets you kind of rolling.
Yep. Cool.
Question?
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. So we're going to get into a couple ways that I hope, as with this one, some things you guys might be thinking, oh, working on a Java app right now, maybe I could grab some JUnit type learning things to pick up. These next couple slides are ways for you guys to learn and support some of this stuff. I thought that was a fun picture. So, yes, I know Kung Fu. So, cat martial arts, not necessarily something that's going to help you guys learn TDD, but code katas. Anybody know what a kata is?
Any martial artist?
Yeah, any martial artists out there? So what's kata?
It's a basic like training form that you can just practice and iterate repeatedly.
That's exactly it. Practice and iterate repeatedly. So it's a process of going through something over and over again. You may know what it is. You may know the answer to it. But the fact that you're able to work through it over and over again and just make it basically muscle memory, right? And that's exactly what you're after with martial arts, is a way to hone your skills through that practice and repetition. So some great things that help you work on kokatas. This is a fun one. It's really cool. If we get a few minutes, I'll actually pull it up and we can talk through it. cyber-dojo.org. This one's really neat. They'll let you go. They'll let you pick the language you want to use. Anything from Java to JavaScript to C languages to a lot of the abstract languages. Yeah, all of them basically. I haven't gone there and not found the one I wanted to practice in. Then pick one of their challenges, one of their problem sets, whether it might be game of life or prime factors or some problem to solve. And then they'll give you the mechanism to start writing the code right in the browser and then start writing the tests right in the browser. You can pair them off and you can start to get the cycle of red-green refactor going. And it's really cool, really convenient. If you were looking to grab a new language and you hadn't done anything with it, that's a great place to start. Start some of that learning and practicing. So codekata.com is one that will give you actually a lot of the, certainly not as intuitive and user-friendly as CyberDojo, but will give you some of the puzzles, some of the problems you can go to work on. This is a neat one to check out. I mentioned that sometimes with TDD, you can get to a spot that seemed way above and beyond where you were going to start. Having and watching Uncle Bob is a big software developer and agile practitioner out there. If you ever get the chance to hear him speak, I've heard him a few times. He's really eccentric but amazing, so it's worth checking out. But watching him walk and talk through the prime factors kata, I think it's actually even just a 15 or half hour YouTube video that you can check out. Seeing him do the process that he takes to do it is pretty amazing. Babies at a computer. That's not indicative of what school is bringing you guys to at all, of course. Pair programming. So I'm not sure how much you guys get into this. Generally in a school environment, you tend to be collaborative. But the context of driving some of that shared knowledge through collaborative context, right? Working together to solve your problems. It offers something you don't get a lot in software. You can get close to instant feedback if you have a really small, tight TDD cycle. One line of code, one test. That gets a little tedious. You tend not to go that deep. But having somebody sit right next to you as you're working through it and typing it out and saying, oh, you misspelt that. Or, oh, you didn't want that method. You wanted the next method. You wanted the method that had the other variable. Having that stuff come intuitively right off the bat instantly is really powerful. So pair programming is a great way to learn and grow.
Before you go on,
Yeah?
I learned most of what I know about test-driven development from pair programming, and it really started out pretty intimidating because I went to meetups where they were doing code, and there were people who were like fantastic at this stuff. And I'm like, great, I have to sit and write code while they're looking over my shoulder at how stupid my code is. But they were cool, and once I got over that, I learned so much faster with somebody next to me who knows what they're doing than trying to hack through it myself and bash my head on the keyboard for an hour.
Yep. It's really good. It taught me a lot. It's helped me a lot. There's a couple different ways that the learning goes through with this. So across the experience, if you get the chance to pair up with an expert and you're an expert, you're going to learn some stuff. You're going to drive stuff faster. Expert with a novice, right? That novice is going to pick up some things. What's the interesting thing that I find out in the enterprise world is just as often the expert's learning from the novice. Oh, well, I didn't think about it that way. Maybe we should try that. And they actually, find something that works for them. And then novice with novice. Those two pairing together are going to help learn together collectively. So, and us across the team. So if you get the chance to pair up the business with the development team, pair up the development team with the testers, and then even the testers with the business. Any of those kind of connections you can create is going to drive better communication, collaboration, and get to that goal, that business value faster. Cool? Any thoughts? You guys get to pair up on stuff when you're working through things in class?
And that doesn't count one person on the keyboard and the other person on Facebook.
True.
That's not pair programming.
Yes. I've been called out for that in the past.
Yeah, survive.
Yes. Cool. Moving on. So, online training. And apparently I didn't fix my order of slide building here. Pluralsight is a good site that will give you, it's basically a full reference library of IT professionals come together and share their learning. So Pluralsight is really powerful. I do believe they have university level contexts that will help you guys get in there because it is a pay site. Skillshare, I believe, is actually free. But another way you can get out there and learn, Skillshare is really good with front-end stuff, web design and HTML, CSS, all of that stuff. There's a lot that plays through in that. It's a little less, more on the hardcore dev stuff, but I think it's out there too. And then local. So one of the things you guys could look into, and I would encourage, is this context that Jeff and I hit on a couple times of coming together to practice. Code Craftsman Saturdays, or aka kind of code retreats, are a chance. Basically, we do them in and around Ann Arbor once a month, every second Saturday. Gives you a chance to come pair up with other developers, sit down, code with them, work on a problem together, ask questions. Tends to be good food, obviously some fun, and you can drive out some great learning that way. So something else to look into. Throw in Code Craftsman Saturdays at Google, and you'll get right to the site. I did just a little bit ago to steal the text. So, any questions? Thoughts? All right, so some noteworthy points. I tend to look at ATDD as the outside-in approach, right? It's knowing what we want from the outside, having a framework there to support that we're building it and getting to the right thing. Whereas TDD is from the inside out. We want to make sure the little pieces that get us to that bigger goal on the outside are doing the right thing. So an outside in and an inside out. And then with respects to things like code craftsmanship, there's a big thing around the software industry with craftsmanship. Starting out as an apprentice, growing through a journeyman, becoming a master, and then becoming an artisan. We've actually taken that to heart at Pillar, and as people join us, they're somewhere between apprentice and journeyman, and they tend to grow through the stages. Ultimately, the goal to be artisans, and we have a few artisans in our collection too. Test coverage and cyclomatic complexity are things that you can get out of this. So basically knowing how complex your code base is, you can start to understand that through some of this testing aspects, as well as the full coverage. Knowing if a lot of your stuff's red, should you be concerned about it? Should you worry? Probably. And it's my belief that as an industry, we tend to focus on the little pieces too much, that we're doing TDD pretty well, proving that the things we build are the right things, but not necessarily the secondary, and that ATDD offers that we're building the things that are actually needed. So we'll come back to my seated question. Would you prefer to build the thing right or build the right thing? So to build the thing right is TDD. To build the right thing is ATDD. And the answer, of course, is both. Ta-da! Amazing, isn't it? All that build up and we only get to that. But it's obviously, right? It's knowing the which and where and when to know what your value is, right? All that takes time. All that takes away from, damn it, I just want to sit there and code. I want my hands on the keyboard. Sometimes we have to step away from that and realize the hands on the keyboard aren't meeting what we really need as the end goal. Thoughts? Good, because now we go to questions. You guys got any questions? Jeff and I are both here. We actually blew through that pretty quick. You guys were not nearly as collaborative as I wanted you to be, but I know that I also fed you full of tacos, so you were kind of in that lull mode. No, seriously, here for questions. If you guys got any you want to share with the whole audience, again, we collaboratively learn. Go ahead and throw them down now, and we'll talk them out. If you don't, we'll skip over. Yeah, what do you got?
What do you think about ATDD in the context of something that a lot of us will be doing, where we're not only the developers, but also the people who will be writing the spec? Do you think that mindset is worth thinking about?
So that is exactly to me. And the question was, as a developer using ATDD in the context of driving the spec to know that you're building the right thing, right? That's exactly where I think BDD fits in, that behavior-driven development. And there are some tools that support that. It's pretty much actually the same, though. It's like Cucumber. So go ahead and bring up Cucumber and throw a couple Cucumber tests out there that prove that what you're building is going to be the end goal, right? That you're getting to your goal. Then build that through the TDD and the small pieces to get to that, and have them both protect you, right? So that's where I think taking that on yourself to know this is the big thing I want and this is how I want it to be. Then I'll use the small pieces to get it there, and then blowing it out. So I think that's actually the ultimate win over both of them, right? So it's the angle.
That those plain language acceptance tests are really good for communicating how your system works to someone who doesn't know anything about your system. So if you bring somebody on, or you get a marketer, or you want to sell your startup, the language, or the plain English language of the acceptance test can get into somebody's head much more quickly, like what this thing is about, than trying to get them through the code.
So a lot of times the resulting aspect of both of those worlds, right, is that hopefully this is something you've built that has value that's going to stay out in the world for some extended period of time. Whether it's you that comes back to it, and literally if you're like me, I forgot what I had for breakfast this morning, I don't know what my code I did yesterday is doing, let alone 2 years ago. That's going to help you protect yourself from yourself so that when you change it later, it's not going to kill you. Those are good things to have that, right, you take along with you. So it's who's going to pick it up next, too, to Jeff's point. To somebody, that next developer that's coming around, if they could read your couple specs right off the bat and say, oh, that's what he's trying to do with this. If I change it, I might be affecting this over there. Those are all good things to have as common understanding so that kind of that Boy Scout motto, leave it better than we found it, right? That's a good thing to bring along with your code, for sure. Other questions? Yeah? All right, then. I'll finish with the one I kind of started with there. That's us. It's my little sales pitch. We are trying to find ways to bring interns in. So we'll be looking at internships. If anybody out there is curious about that, certainly towards the summer context, reach out to us. And then also, as you guys look to head on out of school, we want you to think about us. This is kind of what we do. These are some of the ways we do it. This obviously was a pretty high-level talk. Please reach out to your ladies that are help organize the events. If you want to go deeper, I can certainly get us to a deeper context where we get right down into the code. And or if we want to take a few minutes, I can pull up Cyber Dojo and show you guys a few of those pieces. So I'll leave that kind of open. Anybody that I'll say that. We'll go ahead and go into that as soon as I ramp up here. Anybody that's interested, go ahead and stick around. Anybody that's got 3 tests tomorrow, like Jess does, go ahead and head off and do your thing. But other than that, I will say thank you. Thanks to Jeff for helping me, and thanks to you guys for coming out. Cool. All right, so let me see if I can get over there.